Hello, I'm Carrie Gard, and welcome back to Tea Time with Tech Marketing Leaders. I know you're expecting a woman sitting beside me, the lovely Gina. We had to reschedule that one, and we are going to have that conversation. Oh, it's going to be so good, and we're going to have it in October. So stay tuned. But you should not be disappointed because this is going to be an amazing show as well. I'm very much looking forward to hanging out with Bill Macaitis, where we are going to unpack GTM. We're going to
I
have
love
a
it.
real take here on what it is, how it's evolved, and our favorite motions as it relates to you all who have been on my show and who we've been speaking to. So just as a friendly reminder, it's about you are probably part of a complex brand, an audience, company who's got to sell a really hard thing. Can't do it in a one-liner. This isn't B2C. This isn't just do it. This is a thing where you got to really build trust with your audience and convince them that you really understand their problem and you can take care of them. And they're going to have to do a lot of wiring and configuring to get this thing to work. And that takes time. And you're going to do it to an audience, a complex audience, who kind of sort of hates us as marketing and sales, and they deal with us because they have to. And we have a lot of trust to sort of build that bridge and convince them that we are not selling snake oil and it's okay, and we want to make sure that we are there to support them. And that takes time as well. So with that in mind, when Bill and I get to our topic today, we're going to do it with that lens because we want it to be for you, where you can take away and run with some of these concepts that Bill has been working on for a long time for SaaS brands. A little bit about Bill. He is a board advisor for service. Let's try that again. He offers board advisory services where he shares and accumulates go-to-market knowledge, leading marketing for the three of the fastest growing SaaS companies in history: Slack, Zendesk, and Salesforce. A little name dropping there. Gotta love it. He's achieved 5 exits over his career as well. So guys, we got an expert in the room here, and I'm here for it. I'm going to have a ton of questions, and I hope you do too. Beauty of being live. I look forward to all of your questions. Bill and we are going to unpack those. So please don't hold back. He's clearly lived this for some of the biggest B2B brands. So let's take advantage of it. He has enjoyed helping other AI and SaaS companies build capital-efficient marketing strategies that drive growth at efficient costs. He dives into product-led growth, PLG, premium models, high-velocity content marketing, SEO, and brand building. He's also dabbled with ABM and many other strategies. He'll show you what has worked to power some of the fastest-growing B2B SaaS companies in the world, and moreover, how to focus on capital-efficient growth for today's environment. Man! That is a wonderful, wonderful line. Thank you for doing my job, Bill. I'm just reading your little
That's a
LinkedIn thing
mouthful
here.
there. Yeah.
It is a mouthful, but it's like how to focus on capital efficient growth. How to focus. I'm going to come back to that because I think
Yeah.
that's like,
A little
we have
important
so
in
much
today's
waste in the
environment.
world.
Yeah.
So much waste. Yeah, well, I'm going to stop there, Bill, because we did some serious name dropping. We've definitely laid out your career, and I'm just really excited to have you on the show. So thank you and welcome.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I was excited to chat today.
It's going to be good. Before we get into it, though, like I said, I did some name dropping. I talked about what you do, but more importantly is your journey and how you got there. So share with us. Tell us all the things. How did you find marketing, or maybe marketing found you?
I think marketing and business found me. I was the nerd in 6th grade that was reading Wall Street Journal and Economist in the back of the class, and I've just always loved it. I've always loved entrepreneurship. I did a first startup right out of college, and I wasn't too smart back then. I didn't even know there were VCs, so we had to like grow it on our own. It was out of the Midwest. It was in the gaming space, but we grew it. We were profitable. We sold it, and I spent about 15 years on the B2C side. So that was kind of unique for me, as I've never been a pure B2B marketer. I've spent about half my career in B2C. So I've worked for really large media companies like IGN Entertainment and News Corp, Rotten Tomatoes, S-Men, just building up these really large audiences. And then about 15 years later, I shifted into B2B, and there's this guy, Mark, and he was building up this, kind of new technology of SaaS and the cloud. And I went over to Salesforce and, just spent time on that side of the house with, Salesforce and Zendesk and Slack, and did a couple IPOs. And then I was just like, what do I do? And I've always loved talking to marketers and helping founders out. And so I shifted more into the advisor side of the house, and now I just help other startups, help them grow, help them scale, help them with marketing, help them with go to market. I know we're going to talk a little bit about that. And that was a lot of fun. And then I was like having all these great conversations with everyone. But I'm like, I kept getting the same questions. And I was like, well, I want to start doing some videos of my own. Like I built up a little studio and I was like, so I started a new channel, a new YouTube channel. It's called SaaS CMO Pro. And you can go there and you can just hear long videos of me talking about all these different topics. And that's been a ton of fun too.
And his little marketing character is a sloth, and that's just the best thing ever.
I love sloths. We could talk for 20 minutes on sloths and really bore everyone, but I love the sloth.
My son's a big fan. He has a sleep story that he listens to every night called Sienna and the Sleepy Sloth, and it's all about how slowing down helps the rainforest. It's so
yes,
good.
Yes.
We're big fans.
They talk about capital efficiency. The sloth is so efficient with their movement, right? I mean, they just conserve energy in the right way. They're camouflaged. Tons of cool things about sloths.
Which makes perfect sense for how you're helping out organizations. It sounds like to maybe slow down, take a beat.
I think I would think, be a little calculated with it, right? I think it's really interesting because I work with a lot of these AI founders and they're amazing people and the products they're coming out with are just breathtaking, the technology. But it's a lot of times they will use a really dated, I'll say it, go-to-market playbook. And that's where I just think those of us in marketing or sales, success support, whoever we are, there's always new ways to do these. And so I lean a little bit more towards the modern approach, right? And I'm sure we're going to dive into that, but it's a really fun topic.
We are. We're going to pull it all apart. It's going to be glorious. Before we get there, though, what's, now that you're in a completely different seat, more from an advisory standpoint, which I'm doing a bit of and I find just so much fun.
Yeah.
I'm glad you do too. Your studio is glorious. If you want to know what Bill's studio looks like, I'm definitely taking notes. You should go check out his video. He breaks it all down for you. It was
awesome. A quick shot. There's the live view of it for those that are seater. There's a couple different angles, but that's a studio.
Man. Well, I'm about to move into a bigger space.
I was like, I need a project here.
Oh, yeah.
You have a great studio, Carrie.
That's always one of my favorite questions is what new hobbies you picked up over the pandemic, and now we know yours. This is great. This is great. So in this new seat of what you're doing from an advisory standpoint, what challenge are you currently facing? What's sort of hard for you in this new role as you talk about, go-to-market and some of these different motions for brands?
Yeah, I think, we're at this incredible nexus point, right? Where there's so many new AI technologies coming out. And I just think that's, really fun. It's really challenging, right? Because I think we're all thinking about how we redo every single step of our work process, right? And I know even myself as shifting into content creation, I really had to think about how do I leverage these AI tools from transcription to video editing to posting it on different social networks. And that's been both fun and a challenge for me, just learning all that, right? I historically hadn't done a huge amount on the social side. So that's been fun. But I think just, for a lot of founders out there, they are thinking about just how do they grow? It's a crowded marketplace, right? I mean, that's a hard thing. There's even if you are starting right now and you've got this amazing AI product or SaaS product, there's 10 other competitors that kind of do similar things, right? And so I really think, the differentiation, how they go to market, how they expand, how they grow, the capital efficiency, all these different tactics, that's the biggest challenge for a lot of these startups right now. And, it's what's going to make or break them.
Oh, don't get left behind. We're going to circle back on that because I'm so curious around how AI is playing a role in these modern go-to-motion opportunities. Let's talk about go-to-market for a second and just define this for folks, because I think we talked about this before we hopped on, but there seems to be a lot of different definitions of how people are thinking about it. I get on my high horse for a second, maybe do one of those ridiculous hot takes that I loathe, but I'm going to say it. I feel like marketing sort of grabbed onto this acronym, go-to-market, like a life raft, and they've sort of owned it, and I'm not sure that they're using it right. So I'm just going to put that out there. What's your, in your experience, you've been around the block, you've helped a couple companies go public that are, just these little whatever, Salesforce, Zendesk, whatever. Um, in your experience, though, how do you define go to market?
Yeah, for me, go to market is the overarching principle of how you take your product and get it out and expose it to everyone. And I think that that entails a lot of different teams, though. That entails marketing, but also entails sales, success, support. It's historically referred to a lot of the customer facing teams. And I think marketing sometimes does want to maybe co-opt that and just say, like, we just do go to market. I remember when I came to the B2B side, and I remember there was a campaigns person I was working with, and they were like, "Oh yeah, like I own go to market," and I was like, "Oh well, we're like really like what are you doing? Or you're coming up with the overarching strategy and everything?" And it was like, no. But I think it's like it's almost everything, and I think for me, go to market. Um, a lot of it refers to all the different channels and strategies you're going to use. And that's what I found with like between sales, success, support, and marketing. There's 1,000 different ways you could technically go to market, right? And you had mentioned some of them earlier, right? Even on the marketing ones, whether you're doing, inbound marketing, you're doing SEO, content PR, you're doing outbound marketing. I classify that as a lot of like paid advertising, outbound campaigns. You're doing outbound sales, you're doing a lot of cold calling, SDRs, maybe you're doing inbound sales where you're getting them from different ways, but they're all doing high velocity motions, PLG. There's 1,000 different ways to do it. And I think that's where, like, I always just try to challenge, founders and just like, hey, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but are you doing it in a way that's efficient? Are you doing it in a way that's maybe customer centric so people don't always hate us, right? So that they actually are like, yeah, I had a good experience with marketing, or actually I had a good experience with sales. Like, I think there's a lot of nuances there. So anyways, I'll let you kind of, riff off that one.
Yeah. No, I think that's important because I think that's one of the things that gets lost in go to market is this notion that it takes the whole company to bring it
Yeah.
to market. I would throw product in there in a big way too,
Yeah, of
especially
course.
around more of these PLG motions that
Yeah.
tend to come up. I don't think PLG is for everyone. I think companies are trying it when they're not quite in the right space to be doing it. But it is, product plays a huge role in that one for sure. So I do think it takes the entire company. I think you had a really good point though, Bill, and I mentioned it too around marketing sort of owning it. Should marketing own the GTM motion, and who within marketing should be driving that if that's the case or not? If it's not marketing, then who should it be?
Yeah, I mean, to me, go to market, that's a more holistic, almost philosophical belief, right? I think that's come from like the founder, the CEO, on which go to market approach they want to take, right? Do you want to be a very sales centric or a sales led growth type company? Do you want to be a more product led growth or PLG type company? Are you targeting enterprises? Are you targeting SMBs? Do you want to take a customer centric approach? Like that was big for us at Slack, right? Like we had a lot of customer centric type metrics like net promoter score and CSAT. We even do crazy things, well, at least when I was there, like I ran sales, success, support, and marketing at Slack. And we would do things like, hey, when someone had an interaction with an account executive, we would survey that person and be like, hey, how was your interaction? How helpful were they? How knowledgeable were they? How responsive were they? Right? Not just did they push you to buy it, right? It was like we wanted to measure all these experiences. So I do think, to your question, like those are like kind of core philosophical beliefs on how you want to grow and the capital efficiency of that. And I don't think that's just marketing. Like you said, product plays a huge role in it as well. So I really think that kind of has to come from the top. I don't think like marketing can just quite own it, or even like a team within marketing can quote unquote own go to market. But obviously I do think these teams have to work together. And when they are working together on a unified go to market approach, that's going to be much more successful than every team having a completely different approach and being very siloed.
I so agree. I so agree. I think it's interesting though to talk about this. I do think it needs to come from the top because I do think it's going to work better when everybody's on board with
Yeah.
the approach. It sounds like though, in order to pull this off the right way, the CEO has to be pretty knowledgeable about the different types of motions. Is that
Yeah. Well,
fair?
yeah. And what I probably say is at least in my experience working with a lot of like SaaS and AI startups, you'll generally have two scenarios. You'll have one where the founder knows sales, marketing, support, knows all these kind of like go-to-market type teams and strategies. And the others are just a very technical founder, right? They came from a technical background and they kind of built a product, but they don't have a lot of experience there. So a lot of times you will have one person, maybe that leads those teams. So like at Slack again, like I was like a CMO/CRO, but I ran marketing, sales, success, support. A lot of times you'll see a COO or a CRO or a CCO, chief customer officer, that they kind of run all these different teams here. I think it really helps if you have one person that kind of understands those business principles and how these teams work together for an overarching go-to-market motion. But I think probably to your question, though, what happens a lot is it's a technical founder. They haven't really defined it, and it's kind of defaulted out to the teams. And it's kind of like marketing's doing its own thing, and sales is doing its own thing, and success is doing its own things. They get very siloed. And even within marketing, you have 5 different teams that are all doing their own thing, that don't work together, don't have shared metrics. And I think that's where you get these very kind of like broken, fragmented go-to-market approaches.
I would agree with that. I think there's a lot of companies out there really struggling with trying to figure out how to pull everybody together. I mean, I host a VIP group every month, and we always inevitably come back to sales and marketing alignment. Like,
Yeah.
even though we try and steer clear of it because we keep talking about it and we don't have a solution for it, or we keep talking about the same solutions, we keep coming back to it. And I think getting to the root issue, you just nailed it. And the problem is that there isn't somebody at the very tippy top, whether it's a CEO or
Yeah.
COO, driving the overarching vision, pulling all the teams together and being like, this is how it's going to roll. We all got to get in the same boat and let's go. And it's got to be agnostic, I
Yeah.
believe. It's
Yeah.
got to be agnostic of marketing and sales. It's got to be somebody who's seeing the bigger picture and pulling it all through, so that the finger pointing.
Yeah, it's so easy for these teams to get confrontational and antagonistic. I think I had a really unique background because I was a Zendesk, so I got to know support and success well. I was a salesperson, I got to know sales well, and I'd always had a marketing background. And so I kind of felt the backgrounds and the pain points of each of these teams. But for a lot of companies, the CRO tends to be just the default salesperson that also now is running these other teams. And you get into a very heavy SLG or sales-led growth motion. So yeah, I think it's really important, like whoever the person is, they have to be agnostic. They have to think about how these teams can work together, not against each other. And I'm sure you've talked about this with your fellow marketing leaders, but I love like shared metrics, aligning sales, marketing, success together. I like more customer-centric metrics, more long-term metrics. And even like, I think a lot of times even the fears that these teams have don't necessarily have to be like PLG. I just did a video on SaaS CMO Pro about talking about how like PLG is actually like an enterprise sales secret weapon. Like it's actually, I think it's a really good thing, right? Like if you have a PLG motion, when we were at Slack, God, we sold to really large enterprises, but by the time they went to the account executive, they already had a usage at that company. They were all using Slack. We already knew like who are the power users in there, who are our friends, who are our evangelists. It was a much easier deal just to expand it than to start from zero and try to go wall to wall, and made these, the account executives' lives were much easier. But I think a lot of times there's just a lot of fear that comes with it, with like, oh, it's going to take my quota or going to steal my deals, or,
Wow.
there's just a lot of misinformation out there. And I think that's because these teams have historically not worked really closely together.
I think that's fair. So when we're breaking down we're starting to see sort of steps come to fruition here, which is great in terms of, defining what your go-to-market strategy is going to be from the very, very top, having somebody agnostic pull the teams together and rally around it, putting the customer-centric metrics in place. Let's talk about those for a second.
Yeah.
What would you define those metrics to be? I feel like everybody just sort of is starting to use revenue as a crutch.
Yeah.
But there's got to be those leading indicators that get to the revenue.
Absolutely.
And each team sort of needs their own metrics to some regard in terms of what they can control. And I feel like if we just yell revenue at the marketing teams and sales teams, we're going to lose. That could be the end goal for everybody. But like to your point, there's got to be other metrics involved. So for you, what are
Absolutely.
those?
Yeah, for me, I think revenue is just an output. Like you said, it's not an input, right? Like the inputs that drive revenue in the customer-centric metrics I like are net promoter score, DAUs, daily active users. So how many people are coming and using your website, your product, or software every day? I like things like product qualified leads. So not just is it a marketing qualified lead, but are they in the product? Are they actually using it? Have they passed the threshold? I love things like time to value. How quickly do people experience value? I like CSAT stuff. So like I talked about with the sales experience, we did that a lot, whether it was within sales, support, or success after someone had an interaction. Was it a good interaction? Was it a delightful interaction, right? I do think, at the end of the day, a brand is the sum of all these different touch points, right? And when you can try to give a delightful experience, delightful sales experience, a delightful website experience, delightful content experience, delightful onboarding experience, those things tend to culminate in a positive way. And even on the branding side, right? Like a lot of B2B companies, I don't know why, like I came from B2C where it was very common to measure your brand awareness, your aided recall, your unaided recall, your sentiment. But a lot of B2B companies don't measure that. And I do think that's a really important one, right? To how do people feel about you, right? All these things, I think when your go to market looks at those metrics, you change dramatically the type of actions you do, and you look at it a little bit more long term in a more customer centric way.
I haven't heard these metrics in like a really long time. I when I worked at Microsoft, when I worked for Microsoft, we were at MEC and Microsoft was one of our clients. I remember social sentiment being like a really big deal. And I forget which tool they used at the time, but it would come back to us as like from an ads team. They would come back and say, from a social sentiment standpoint, like, here's what's happening and here's how we need to change our messaging. And so new ads are coming your way. And that was really standard for them. But I haven't heard that in such a long time. I don't know if it's because I work with smaller brands that then sort of grow into that, needing those tools and they can't afford them right away, or if they've just gotten really expensive. I don't know what the case is, but man, sentiment, I feel like, is so underappreciated. And what's interesting to me as you're talking about it, Bill, is, and we were talking about the changes you make, it sounds like, you're going to correct me, it's going to be great, but it sounds like the changes you make become more human instead of just like the change of a button color or trying to just get your click-through rate up or your CPCs down. It's like, well, how is our messaging resonating and how do we adapt to really make them feel something? And so is that when you're talking
Yeah.
about the changes and the decisions you make, or is it feels more qualitative versus quantitative, which feels really gray and fuzzy. And now I think everybody's probably freaking out a little bit. So reel us back in.
So the good thing is, like with all these customer centric metrics, you can measure this stuff. You can measure it. It's just you just take a different approach. You're like, all right, for instance, if we care about daily active users and we want to get people actually using the software more, okay, we're marketers, right? Well, should I work on the website or maybe I should actually spend time in the product? Maybe I should be working with my product folks to think about what that onboarding sequence looks like. Maybe as opposed to defaulting all the text on the onboarding to the backend developer that wrote it, maybe we have one of the marketers write it, We did a lot of Slack, like all the prompts, the dialogue, the onboarding, the release notes were written by marketers that just we had developed a unique editorial tone and voice. It was fun. It was whimsical. Maybe marketing needs to spend more time making the product have a little life, right? Have a unique visual identity. Like I see this all the time in B2B SaaS. Like you'll go to their websites and they're like, whoa, like beautiful, great, tons of colors, tons of emotion. And then like, all right, I'll sign up, I'll go into the product and it's like white background, tiny black text, 1,000 things going on, very sterile, lifeless. So, when you have a metric like DAUs, marketers think of things differently. They're like, whoa, maybe I need to actually get in the product. When you have a metric like net promoter score, now you're like, oh, how do I give people a good experience? Maybe I shouldn't gate everything, right? Well, my metric before was just leads. Well, of course, you're going to gate everything, right? You're going to give people bad experiences. I always hate that. Like, I will go to a website and like, oh, what do you do? And it's like, no, I have to fill out a 17 field form. And then I have to talk to a salesperson. And I'm like, I just want to find out like what you do, right? But if all we have is leads as a metric, of course, we're going to be driven to that. So now if you have net promoter score, well, how do we have a more delightful experience? All right, well, maybe I record a demo that they can just watch there, or maybe they can schedule a time, or maybe we can just drop them right into the product, right? It just forces you to think about things differently. Or I even have another one. This is going to really like push the boundaries here, but like how fun is your product? And I would argue, again, you can measure that. You could do a CSAT survey 1 week after they've used it. Hey, how fun was using our product? Thumbs up, thumbs down, right? All right, 17% gave us a thumbs up. Okay, product marketing team, our goal is to get that from 17% to 30%. How could we make it more fun? Like, for instance, Slack, our number one integration was not Salesforce, was not HubSpot, was not a backend data analytics tool. It was Giphy. People like to have
Yes.
animated GIFs,
Yes. I got in so much trouble moving away from Slack because they no longer had their Giphies. So much trouble.
Giphy, right? Yes. And people are having more fun. And now they're using the tool more. And because they're using the tool more, it's growing faster. They're talking about it more. The brand sentiment improves. Your word of mouth improves. All these input revenue metric, funnel metrics start to improve. But again, that was an input to it, right? So I just think a customer-centric playbook isn't for everyone. It's a very different philosophy on how you go about it, how these teams work together. But I do think you can quantify it. There's definitely lots of good metrics out there. Some of them are POG type metrics, some of them are experience type metrics. But it's a different way of thinking. You're not just looking at everything of like, how do we just squeeze as much out of a short-term, funnel and get more leads, even if those leads aren't good. There's a lot of bad things we can do in marketing. And I think that's why you get some of these people hate marketing and sales.
I am so grateful to be talking about something different other than leads and revenue. This is a breath of fresh air, Bill. I am so grateful. And in terms of those, it's all sentiment and qualitative too, which I think is so interesting. And again, something we haven't talked about in a long time. So I'm excited for people to start wrapping their heads around that. It's going back to basics a little bit. And I think that got so lost, and it tends to be one of those things that we're like, well, that's a B2C thing. Like B2C wants to have fun and like, we're not allowed. And that's so untrue. I love Slack for that reason. I love Gusto for that reason. Gusto has this little pig that pops up. That's hilarious.
Is that great?
Because you're getting paid today, right?
Yeah. A little Easter egg.
Little piggy bank, getting paid today, right? Like, yes, thank you for, infusing and making my job a little extra fun. So I love that. I think we can even do that from some of the more serious products. Not to say that getting paid isn't serious, very serious from a Gusto standpoint. It's why I use them, because they're one of the, for as fun as they are, they're also from a customer-centric standpoint. Like the fact that I can call and get a person is just so huge. But I do think when we're talking about products that are more in the cybersecurity space or in the healthcare space, you can still, like, we're all still human and we still love entertainment. We still like to have fun.
Yeah. Another one is just, and I've worked with cybersecurity firms, and another big one I've always advocated for is just how simple or easy to use is your product, right? I think a lot of companies go down this path, especially as they sell in the enterprise. They just want to add feature after feature after feature after feature. And it becomes harder and harder and harder to use the more features you add. And so it's a different playbook. Again, that's another customer-centric one. It's just like, hey, is your software easy to use? And, I remember I was working for a really large enterprise. I was, doing advisory work, and I had to submit my invoice. And I would think, I don't know, how long do you think it should take, Carrie, to submit an invoice to a large company? Like 5 minutes?
A few minutes.
3 minutes? It took me 2 hours. Like they were using some back end like procurement system from the 1990s, and it had all like 3-point fonts, and I had to go through 17 steps, and I was so frustrated. I was pulling out what little hair I have left, and it was like, oh my God, it was such a horrible experience. But I kind of know, like, the product team was probably just like, oh, here's a roadmap. We just have to keep adding feature after feature after feature. And you can't underestimate, like, first of all, most users only use like 10% of your features, right? And when you have a really hard to use product, well, then you have to cover it up with a lot of success and support, and that's expensive, right? And so we always talk about these capital efficiency ways to grow. Just a simple, beautiful, fun product, like it's such an easy strategy, and it works so well. I've seen it work time and time again for different SaaS companies. And again, I think like marketing has a part in that. Like we're good at making things simple and, clarifying our message, or we're good at CRO, conversion rate optimization. But part of that too is just like, hey, how do we get people through the next step? How do we reduce friction, right? Adoption friction, pricing friction. I think like marketing can help there. So yeah, I think there's just a lot of different playbooks, and that always kind of goes back to my, a more modern go-to-market playbook, I think, is B2B marketers. Sometimes we have to challenge the traditional 30-year-old funnel metrics that marketing, you're just in charge of leads or top of funnel, and that's your only job. I think marketing has a much more holistic impact they can make on the entire customer journey. And it is a journey, right? It's not just one thing. You have to realize these are people and nurture and educate and delight them through the entire funnel.
Gosh, it sounds more fun too.
It is. Yes.
Sounds much more fun. I gotta say, it's a real slog, as an agency, right? So we do digital ads and SEO for companies, and the lead metrics that we're held to are just exhausting because we can hit them, that's fine, but then you're asking us how much revenue you made, right?
Yep.
And it's like, it's so tough. It's just really, really tough to think about the quantity over the quality. And I just love some of these different metrics to be thinking about from a quality standpoint. So I'm excited to start wrapping our own arms around those for clients. That's amazing. Let's talk about some of the different go-to-market motions. We mentioned I said motions twice essentially. Different go-to-market opportunities. Yeah.
There you go.
So you have PLG, which we've talked a lot about, and I want to come back to that in a second. But let's just list off a couple of your favorites when it comes to the B2B space, complex brands, and these lovely audiences that really struggle with us.
Yeah. So I'm a big believer in content. I think you need to go where your audience is, right? And in B2C, that's that's kind of fundamentally understood, as you go where the eyeballs are. Right. Mm-hmm. And the eyeballs are always using different things. And there's like this lagging time for B2B companies to go where their buyers and prospects actually are. And I think the big thing now that you see is like, you just have way more people on social, you have way more people on mobile, and you have way more people on video. Right. So in our personal lives, we probably all spend a lot of time, on our phone, scrolling through and increasingly watching, these shorts, these videos. And I think like that's where there's a huge opportunity for a lot of B2B companies to go, because their competitors aren't there. Right. They're all still writing white papers, or they're just doing, more expensive type outbound, but you've got a great chance to build a relationship. And again, I like the content side of it. So I'm not even just like, hey, just, you can run ads on social video, but I like create content, create helpful content that's going to educate them, that's going to nurture them. I mean, I think we all intuitively know this in the B2B space. These are long deal cycles, right? When we would sell, Slack, Salesforce, Zendesk to the enterprise, this was not like they saw us in one day and bought us. This was a long time across multiple stakeholders. You're trying to convince the procurement person, the IT person, the InfoSec person, the finance person, the C-suite, and the line of business, right? So you have 8 different stakeholders, all with various different levels of knowledge of your particular, solution. And so like, I always view these are long journeys, and content, and I've always tried to invest in content, but good content, not slimy brochureware content, which is just, hey, buy us today for these 10 reasons, but just like, hey, write content about the pain of that role, right? And how, slowly educate them about what your space even does, buyer's guides, and list your competitors and why you're good, why you're not, and show other customers and how they're using you, and view it as a long journey. And I think like when you can take that content and deliver it via social, you are going to be in a little more modern playbook. And of course, there's lots of AI tools that make that process a lot easier now that you can manage that. But that's a good one for me, because I've always loved SEO. I grew up doing SEO, and I grew up doing a lot of content for B2C companies. And I think B2B, there's a huge opportunity to do that.
100% agree. I mean, from an SEO perspective, we run technical audits, and we check it over the fence and say, your technical team, your web dev team needs to figure these out, right? You need to speed up your website. You need to, you got some duplicate content here, but like, we can't fix any of that for you. We're just telling you what your problems are. Go fix it. Great. What we really want to focus on is the content. Where are the content holes? Where are your opportunities? Where's the empty space that you can go fill to really tell those stories around what pain you solve, and why you solve it better than anybody, depending on who your ICP is, right? And so I 100% agree that content is definitely the way. I will say the pushback we get, and how you might be really helpful here, is the resource intensity that content creates. Now, AI is definitely here to stay. It is wonderful. I am having a blast with Dolly right now for
Yeah.
all of my clients' content for their newsletter and stuff. I am just making these wonderful visuals for all of their blog posts, and it is so much fun. So I do think that there are some AI hacks that help with the content lift, but video in particular, as we know with our beautiful studios that we poured, tons into, we know what that lift is for these folks. And so help us help them in terms of getting started, where to start, because you can't eat the elephant.
Yeah.
Don't eat the elephant. And what are some of those other tips and tricks to help scale it without the resource, knowing that they probably don't have a full content team at their fingertips?
Yeah, the nice thing is, I think in the last couple of years, there's been so many good solutions out there that make content creation easy, that make content distribution more seamless. So for a lot of B2B companies, what you'll usually have is you'll have some assets. Maybe you have one long form interview, right, with your CEO. And the good news is, hey, there's tons of tools out there that will take that long form video and chop it up into 13 sections. When we finish this, we'll probably like go through and take the best sections and post it out on social. And there's great AI tools that will do that for you. I use tools where we'll go through, it'll automatically, AI will grab all the entire transcript, right? So then you can summarize it, you can do different things with it. There's tools that will allow you to post to multiple different services. So they'll post to X and YouTube and LinkedIn all simultaneously. So I would say that the heavy lifting that historically had been from either creating content, re-leveraging that content, or distributing that content is significantly coming down. And I just think, like, again, you got to go where the eyeballs are. You look at any industry stat on where people are spending their time. It's on their phone. It's increasingly on video, whether that's Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube. They're all shifting to video. So I would just say, try to get a little ahead of that if you can. Make those investments, with agencies or in-house, whatever it is, right? You're going to be in a better place.
The way that we've been able to get it done internally and for I do it for a couple of our clients is systems and processes, right? So it's really helpful to get into a flow to be able to execute it on a consistent basis. So whatever that is. So if you're going to take one piece of content, like I did a great interview with an executive coach who's one of my clients, and now I'm just going to take that and delve it up into different sections. I'm going to have different pieces on the website depending on what he's talking about. I'm going to surface it all over social media for sure. And it's an hour long. That's probably going to be, 15 pieces of content. Easy. So I think the system and process is really key to figuring out, like, okay, we have the video, now what do we do? And putting that, once you build it once, and then just you get to rinse and repeat. So I can go do other interviews. It'll be great. So I do think that's helpful.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, Goldcast, the company I've worked with, and they do a lot of event video, but they're really repositioning to just be able to re-leverage this video everywhere, right? And I find that a lot of times, especially B2B companies, a lot of times you'll have a field marketing team or an events team, and there's just a gold mine of great quality content there that you can, re-leverage and for social and content in other places. So I certainly think, like, there's great tools and opportunities to leverage that. They use a lot of AI. They're a great tool, but there's a lot of good ones out there.
Yeah. Tons of tools. Find your tech stack, stick to it, iterate on it if you need to, but get up, more importantly, not more importantly, but and a system and process. In terms of going back to the video, one of the most important things you said, you've been talking customer-centric, which I totally love and agree with. When it comes to creating content, the last thing we want to do is create more noise, especially if we're talking to very specific audiences that aren't that big, right? So in terms of being thoughtful around the quality aspect, how do you go about figuring out what to even say? I find that that's such a roadblock for people to just get started.
Yeah, so we did this a lot at Zendesk, and I would always tell our content team, hey, just go talk to our ICPs and ask them about their day and ask them what their pain points are, right? And let's just talk about, those pain points, right? It's great content. It's going to help them out. So for instance, like, one of our most popular pieces of content we created at Zendesk was the top 10 interview questions for hiring customer support agents, right? Because if you're in support leadership, you historically have really big teams. There's a lot of turnover. You're constantly hiring, and they have to do a lot of interviewing, right? And they want to find out, hey, what are some good interview questions? Was Zendesk like an ATS, or did we hire people? No, we didn't. That wasn't our thing at all. But we created content that helped out a very big pain point that they went through. And then, that content also had links to other pieces of content. And then we slowly started to talk about just customer support and where we see it moving. And then there was a little bit, oh, by the way, and this is what we do at Zendesk. Here's what we offer. Here's how some cool customers are using us. I think a lot of times as B2B marketers, we want to rush to that very bottom funnel content. Like, we're awesome. Buy us today. These 6 reasons, right? And it's like, well, let's slow it down a little bit here.
You got to get your foot in the door.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And I think that's a really great example of pressing on a pain where you don't have customer success people that you're trying to, sell into these companies, but the customer success people use your product. And so there's wonderful partnership in that content of solving a pain for your customer, and also talking about the people who are going to be using this in a way that, like, we understand what you need to be doing, what problems you're going to have, and, oh, by the way, here's all the things at Zendesk that we can support. From an SEO perspective, I mean, link building, internal link building all day, every day. So that's a wonderful way to do it, for sure.
Yeah, you got to cross-link.
Got to cross-link. I think we only have one more time for another go-to-market opportunity. One of the things that my friend, there was a podcast yesterday from a few friends of mine who were talking about different go-to-market strategies. And one of the things that they were talking about is that you can't just have one. So if you're talking about content as a key opportunity, what would you partner with that one to really make it, get to the next level? Let's say content led is your primary, but then what are some secondaries that need to support it?
I'm a huge believer in PLG, right? So that SaaS CMO Pro channel I made, I literally have done 27 videos just on product-led growth. That's how much I love it. And I don't think product-led growth is just the product team doing it. I think product-led growth is just this idea that people spend more time in the product, in the software, right? So you have to infuse your marketing into the product, your sales into the product, your support into the product, right? And I even think the pricing and packaging that goes along with a PLG motion can have a big influence. So like I'm a huge believer in freemium motions. I know it's kind of a polarizing topic, but one of the reasons I love freemium motions is you hire basically millions of free marketers, right? They're out there talking about your product and recommending your product. And when you combine a freemium motion with a content play, now you have a lot of educated free marketers that are out there, again, spreading the word and, switching jobs and taking tech with them and moving into new opportunities. So I love that content. And I would even argue another thing you could tie with that is leverage that content for your existing customers too, right? Like, again, a lot of times as marketers, I think sometimes we are forced to just say, oh, you're just top of funnel or just leads and above. Well, that content is great for existing customers too. They're hiring, if there's Zendesk, they're hiring customer support agents too. That's helpful for them, right? Content about your space, content about what's possible within your product. In fact, usually in SaaS and AI, half your revenue comes from add-on upgrade expansion. So, you want to be continuing to market to your existing customers because that's a huge growth opportunity. And again, don't just say this is customer success. They have a part in that and continuing to upgrade and add on. But marketing, we're really good at campaigns. We're good at content. We're good at automating a lot of this as well. So I think there's, again, like you said, there's thousands of go-to-market motions you can be using. Using one is just a little dangerous. I don't think you should be doing 1,000 because you'd be spread way too thin. But I do like the PLG type motions. I like the content, the inbound. And again, really think about how you can use AI in each of those to help accelerate and deliver more value.
In terms of PLG, I just want to make sure we wrap this up with a bow for folks, because I'm not going to say I'm under the impression, I think you could do this at any point, but I feel like it's easier to do PLG when you're just getting started, because it really comes into, there's such a product lift there, a developer lift. And so if you try and bring PLG in later, it feels like it's going to be a little harder. Not impossible, But I also want to be thoughtful around, I think there's a misconception. You said there's lots of misconceptions. One of the misconceptions I tend to see is that people think PLG is just a trial.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's so funny. I'm just such a PLG geek. Like I've done videos on almost every topic you mentioned there. So I did a video on the 7 landmines of doing a PLG initiative. I've done a video on what is PLG, on how there's really like 27 different elements as a part of PLG. It's not just a free trial. I literally worked with a client that was like, yeah, we're doing a PLG motion. I'm like, oh, great. Like, are you doing like in-product education, high velocity buying? Are you doing reducing friction, time to value? And oh, we're just adding a free trial. And I'm like, well, that's like one slice of it. It's an important slice. And I'd even argue you should go a true freemium, not crippleware or not free trial. But there's a lot of elements to it. And to your point too, it is absolutely more difficult. I've helped a lot of companies implement a PLG motion, and it's much more difficult when they're a Series C, D established company. And especially if they're a sales-led growth company and they're transitioning to PLG or adding an addition to it. Very hard culturally. There's a lot of roadblocks, a lot of inertia. So I do think, when you embark on a PLG motion, really try to educate yourself on, what it is, all the different teams that need to be involved for it, the right metrics to set for it to be successful. It's not for the faint of heart, but when you implement it, wow, if you do it right, it can be incredible for your long-term growth and the capital efficiency of that growth. It's a huge capital efficient driver.
I just want to double down on freemium because it gets a bad rap. I was using a freemium model for a company called, I don't mean to throw them under the bus because I still think they're a wonderful company. But so GetAccept is this really cool sales product. They're actually in Europe, very cool founder. And I went to use it one day and I was literally locked out because I had to immediately upgrade. So they didn't tell me that I was going to need to upgrade. And I don't need I don't need the kitchen sink that they sell. I just needed what the freemium model which was basically 3 documents I could get signed at a time. And I never hit 3 at a time. Maybe I had 1 or 2. I never hit 3. But I talked about them relentless to everybody. So talking about like free marketing, yep. I was definitely one of their free marketers. I loved their project. I loved talking about them. And then I can't access it anymore. And so I'm so bummed. And I just think that's a really wonderful piece that people lose sight of. If somebody's in there and they're not in it every day and they're not paying for it, that then they shouldn't, maybe we just need to start charging for it. And it's like, do you though?
Yeah, I know GetAccept. I've actually talked to them in the past, and I'm a big fan of their solution. It's a great solution.
It's so cool.
And it's it was founded by salespeople, right? And in a good way, right? But it's very difficult, I think, sometimes for sales to really embrace a PLG type motion, right? So I would just argue, like, I think in general, freemium is very misunderstood by sales folks. Again, like I just did a video on that, like how like sales should view like PLG as their best friend, right? It can be really, really good for them, but there's a lot of scary stuff on it. And I think even if you have a freemium motion, sometimes they'll just go to crippleware, right? Like it's such a feature limited version. I think the ideal for anyone that wants to go down this journey from a pricing and packaging standpoint is have a free plan, have a very robust free plan, but put in thresholds, right? So like what we did at Slack is we said, like, hey, like you can use Slack for free for all the different types of features, right? And when you hit 10,000 messages, then only at that point, you can still keep using it, but we're just going to say, hey, we can only keep the most current 10,000 messages. The older ones are going to start getting deleted. And that usually didn't hit until like 6 months in, right? Yep. And even then, you could still keep using it. So like I said, I think there's a lot of different variations here, and the really smart B2B companies can get the positive benefits, all this crazy word of mouth growth and the improvements in your brand and your sentiment, and even use it as a conversion funnel, but it is a long-term one. It takes a little bit of time to get there.
It does. And I love what you're saying in terms of taking the time to nurture those folks, and that it could take 6 months, but I think the payoff is awesome. I am so grateful for this conversation, Bill. I could talk to you all day long, but clearly you're like 1 step ahead. You know all my questions because you've already answered them on your channel. So
great questions.
If you want to know more about Bill and what Bill's got going on in terms of all of these different motions, especially PLG, head on over there. We'll drop the link in the comments, as well as Bill's profile, so you can find him to find out more about the metrics we should be using for long-term and sentiment to coupling, content and PLG and being able to build our brands for the long haul. I'm here for it. Bill, before we go, you're more than a marketer. You're more than a video content creator. I want to know, I know that Q4 doesn't technically start until October 1st, but let's all get real. It's starting next week. The race is on. It's here. End of the year. What are you most looking forward to in closing out 2024?
Well, I got to say, my other passion beyond AI and SaaS marketing is gardening. So for me, I'm harvesting the last of the fall crops that are coming out. We do a lot of tomatoes and summer squash, and we just had some great pears that we were harvesting and nectarines. So I'm in the Bay Area. So we have a very late summer. It's kind of weird. We still can get stuff all the way up through late October. But yeah, Q4 is fun. I was just thinking about that. It's like Halloween, I have a daughter, and that's always fun, getting out all the decorations, and you get to see a lot more family coming out. So yeah, there's definitely the business element of Q4. The interesting thing is a lot of SaaS companies, their Q4 starts on November 1st. So they do November 1st, December, and January, because they were such seasonal buying, and they didn't want the quarter to end right on the holidays. So it'll kind of shift a little bit depending on the space you're in there.
Yeah, we have some clients where we actually renew in February for that reason. It's so smart. I live in the UK now, and Halloween is not as big here. And I gotta say, it's such a bummer. But I throw my kids a little Halloween. It's not Easter, obviously, but an Easter egg hunt, but with candy, and I light up the whole house. Yeah, so it's super fun, and I try and make it up to them, because it's one of Thanksgiving and Halloween. I got, it's hard to not be in the US during those holidays, but I try and bring a little piece of home with me wherever I go. So I'm here for it, Bill. Yes to Q4. Yes to these things. Let's go.
Good deal. Awesome. Well, thanks again for having me on. This was a ton of fun, Carrie.
Thank you so much for joining me. And thank you to our listeners. If you like this episode, please like, subscribe, and share. This episode was brought to you by MKG Marketing, the digital marketing agency that helps complex brands get found via SEO and digital ads. It's hosted by me, Carrie Gard, CEO and co-founder of MKG Marketing. Music mix and mastering done by Snappy. And if you'd like to be a guest, hit me up. I'd love to have you on. Thank you all so much.
Thanks.